We live in a society filled with short-term attention. However, it wasn't always like this. In the 1900s, society focused on more long-term problems, and one of these people were Danny Hills. Danny Hills saw that the idea of short-term attention was coming soon, and this was in the 1980s as well. We know that short-term attentions are ubiquitous, and it's extremely dangerous in society. We all know this, but how do we keep this long-term goal? Goals that reach hundreds of years, maybe thousands. How do we make sure that we keep reminding ourselves of certain endeavors? What about 10,000 years? This clock does a simple job. It depicts time. Although it's a simple mission, it's a complex task to achieve. The creators added restrictions for the clock, and with restrictions for all projects comes the embodiment of creativity. 1. The clock has to be mechanical. No electronical parts should be used. 2. It has to keep running for 10,000 years without any human intervention. 3. It should be evocative, capturing imagination and long-term thinking. These weren't all the restrictions, and there were obviously some other restrictions that had to be in place. For instance, the engineering of the clock and probably some others. However, I believe that these 3 ones were the main reason for the clock even existing. The clock is entirely mechanical, made up of long-lasting materials, including titanium, ceramics, quartz, sapphire, and 316 stainless steel. It contained more than 12 large gears, the diameter of a human. However, with friction, the clock is bound to tune out. To reduce this, the clock is meant to go incredibly slow. It employs a 10-foot-long steel pendulum that swings once every 10 seconds, resulting in a slow and deliberate display of time. It also uses ceramics to eliminate the use of lubricants and oils that could perhaps change the amount of friction on one side of the gear to the other. It's actually quite impressive. However, friction, although it's minimal, can still have devastating effects in the long-term future. To balance this force, the clock uses a solar synchronizer, heating a chamber of air that moves a graphite cylinder. The movement of the graphite cylinder results in a titanium pendulum slowly drifting away and correcting the time. From this, the researchers stated that the clock will always know the right time. There are always forces that vary within the region the clock is in, and it might be minimal, but over 10,000 years, it could be a huge problem. The clock is indeed very precise. However, accuracy isn't achieved until the clock is stored without any variables impacting it whatsoever. To counter this, the clock is placed very high, approximately 1,500 feet above a desert in Texas, which is located underground. An airlock is in place for wild animals and dust to be kept away. The drive weight of the clock's manual power system is extremely heavy at 10,000 pounds. Solar energy is also funneled in and stored for later use, so that over the years, if there isn't any sunlight, then the clock can still run. Human regulation and annual checks for the clock do exist. However, the clock can also run without any human intervention, using solar energy and the movement of its own gears and pendulums. If in any case the clock is out of tune, then winding can occur with human intention, but it shouldn't happen. The engineering behind the clock is incredible. There aren't any electrical sources whatsoever, and all of them consist of gears and are powered using thermal energy and pendulums. But what's the point? We really underestimate what 100 years looks like in the future, let alone in the past. Some people are 100 years, whereas others are just being born right this second. Our brain remembers time logarithmically. Because of this, the first day of a newborn feels much longer than any other day lived. If you do remember that, that is. But what about like 10,000 years? Although you've seen this number before, and you probably understand what 10,000 years means, but do you really? It's hard to state a reference for 10,000 years, as none of us have actually lived 10,000 years, but I guess I could say this. The oldest civilization recorded to date was Mesopotamia, around 3,000 years ago. We've come this far from 3,000 years. Technology is rapidly increasing. Obviously, it won't stay like this forever, but imagine another 10,000 years. It would be hard to imagine, and you're probably wrong. And the worst part is, we'll never even know. Mr. Kelly stated that the purpose was so that people would ask this question, and to recognize that they asked this question, and infer other questions that branch off of this. If a clock can keep going for a millennia, shouldn't we make sure civilization does as well? It raises a question for how we should shape our future, and see if we can keep humanity going for thousands of years, to see how we can advance technologies and evolve morals and ethics and use them in a correct manner. Through the 10,000 years that occur in the future, culture is bound to evolve. If humanity does exist, our laws would completely change because some of the things today would just not exist. Because of this, Mr. Kelly incorporated chimes into the clock, one which plays every day, but slightly varies. It's done with the gears changing on a long enough time span so that each time the chimes ring, it'll hit something different. It's the representation of dynamic change, slight every day. To see the clock 10,000 years in the future, the biggest problem isn't decay, corrosion, nor the power source. It's the people. If the clock isn't an important symbol to humanity, it will be scrapped away eventually. But if it does remain a symbol for humanity, then it will last its entire lifetime and will destroy itself eventually. None of us know the future. Time passes us no matter what we do. But just like how James Salk said it, are we truly being good ancestors? Take care.
This grandeur of our universe.
Bypass across the board, Scooter, no action.
Houston now control.